All right, this is the whole story. We're looking really at the travel bans right now that have been imposed across the world, specifically targeting South Africa and other countries in the southern African region. Now, there have been accusations, both by South Africa and by the United Nations, that these travel bans are racist. We're going to take a look at why this is being said. Nations across the world, we know, have imposed travel curbs right now. Vaccine makers are saying that they're studying to find out if the vaccines that we have at this point are effective against Omicron, which is the new variant that we have, or whether or not we would need booster shots. But the country of South Africa, meanwhile, has said it is being punished for doing the good work of detecting the new variant for the rest of the world. In the meantime, as we told you in the news, India has detected 2 cases in Karnataka, according to the health minister of the state of Karnataka. One of those cases was a citizen of South Africa who has since returned to the country. The other is a doctor, a local doctor who is being observed. Now, let me tell you where the new variant came from, when it came in, the timeline, and of course, make that clear distinction between where it originated from and where it was first detected from. This is the whole story of why South Africa feels it is currently being treated in a racist manner. Now, the WHO has noted that South Africa reported the variant, was the first to report the variant, but it did not originate in South Africa. And there's evidence for that. But somehow it has still translated into travel bans. As early as November, laboratory technicians at the Lancet Laboratories in Pretoria in South Africa found unusual features in the samples that they were testing. A gene was missing in the normal genome profile of the COVID virus. PCR tests were not detecting, the virus as they were expected, and this was a signal that something about the virus had changed. A few days later, the same thing was reported at the Lancet's molecular pathology department in Johannesburg in South Africa. Reports said that the discovery coincided with an increase in the number of positive cases in the country. Now, new cases appeared after weeks of calm, after the last wave had ripped through Johannesburg in July. South Africa also, I must point out to you, leads genome sequencing in Africa and has done this right through the pandemic. The country has specific strong abilities for laboratories and for genome sequencing and for research, which is why they say they were able to detect these changes that would have otherwise gone unnoticed, and they shouldn't be punished. Now, on the 25th of November, this announcement triggered global panic and a market meltdown. Countries including the UK and the US began imposing flight bans to and from South Africa, and then we saw everybody else start to follow. On the 26th of November, the one day later, the WHO classified the variant as the B11529, called it a variant of concern, and gave it a name, Omicron. WHO has said that it was done by the technical advisory group because Omicron had several mutations, but we didn't know what those mutations do. So to put it very simply, imagine if you were watching X-Men and there was one particular mutant in X-Men, and you know that it had a lot of mutations, but you didn't know what superpowers that mutant gave. But that mutation gave that particular character. That's where we are right now. The WHO has told us that Omicron is very different from the original virus, but we don't know what power that difference gives it. So is it more transmissible? Does it make people very sick? Is it resistant to antibodies? We don't know yet. So hold your horses on that one. Now, since then, including the 2 that I told you about in India, 24 countries have detected cases of this virus. In South Africa, as of now, it's become the dominant variant. Last reported, there were about 8,500 new COVID cases, doubled from the previous day, which was 4,300 COVID cases. So that's really worrying. And according to Reuters, 74% of those new cases are of the Omicron variant. Of the 249 viruses that have been genome sequenced in South Africa in November. What's happened in India, like I told you, 2 cases have been detected. According to the Joint Secretary of the Home Ministry in India, neither of those cases had any severe symptoms at all. No case, by the way, according to our Home Ministry, in the world have shown severe symptoms. So it's not making people very, very sick, putting them in hospital. That's what we know so far. But taking a look at how countries have reacted to this. And that is really where, the story that we're talking about comes in. 24 countries have detected these cases and they've imposed massive travel bans on Africa. The UK has a red list of African countries: Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe. Israel has banned entry for all foreigners and a red list of 50 African countries. Italy, Germany, France, Canada, Netherlands, Switzerland, Japan, they're all bringing in tougher border controls specifically on African countries. The United States, beginning midnight, 1 minute past midnight on Monday, will bar the entry of nearly all foreign nationals who have been to any of the 8 southern African countries in the last 14 days. And so it continues: Pakistan, Kuwait, Mauritius, South Korea. In India, we've made a list of at-risk countries, which includes South Africa, Brazil, Botswana, China, Mauritius, New Zealand, Zimbabwe, Singapore, Hong Kong, the United Kingdom, and Israel. And these people will have to undergo a quarantine of 7 days at home, even if they test negative. Also, our country, DGCA, has decided not to resume normal international flights. Now, coming back to the question of why this is racist, now, 2 things that we must realize. Like I told you in the beginning, South Africa has been saying that it is being punished for doing its job. The president of the country has condemned the travel bans enacted against the country and its neighbors. And he said he's deeply disappointed by the action he described as unjustified and called for the bans to urgently be lifted. He's also said, and I quote, and this is Cyril Ramaphosa has said, "We call upon all of these countries that have imposed travel bans on our country and our Southern African sister countries to immediately and urgently reverse their decisions. The prohibition of travel is not informed by science. The only thing the prohibition of travel will do is further damage economies that were affected and undermine their ability to respond to and recover from the pandemic." Now, you'll remember the UN, the United Nations, and the WHO repeatedly cautioned the rest of the world that Western countries or high-income countries, rich countries, basically, were not sharing their vaccines. They gave, most of the Western countries have very high rates of vaccination of their citizens, and they're now issuing a 3rd dose or a booster dose. Now, WHO and UN repeatedly called this immoral and said that countries have to share vaccines with those parts of the world where the vaccinations have not arrived. Africa, for example, is only 10% vaccinated. The entire continent of Africa is only 10% vaccinated. And like I said, UN had warned repeatedly, and WHO had warned repeatedly, that if Africa is not adequately vaccinated, there will be mutations of the virus that occur in Africa. It was not prophetic, it's just pure science, and that is what we're seeing happening right now. And then, to make matters worse, travel bans. And let me tell you what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said about the travel bans. First of all, he said, and this is important, he said, "We have instruments of safe travel. Let's use those instruments and avoid this kind of, allow me to say, travel apartheid," which I think is unacceptable. This was said by Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who said that the travel bans, he said, are unfair and ineffective. He said the virus is truly borderless, and travel restrictions which isolate one country or one region are not only deeply unfair and punitive, they are ineffective. Collectively, he said that these countries are being punished for identifying and sharing crucial scientific information with the world. So effectively, on one hand, we have most of the high-income countries that had access to vaccines, used them up, 1 dose, 2 dose, and now the 3rd dose without sharing it with low-income countries in Africa. And now when a variant has been detected and announced to the world, Africa is being locked out again, which will only lead to further pain, worsening economies, and like was said by the South African head of state, a weakening ability to respond to what is happening in that country. Now, here's some of the evidence that I talked about in the beginning. There is a report in NPR that says Dutch health authorities on Tuesday said the new variant was detected in Europe a week before it was detected in South Africa. It was present in the Netherlands a week earlier than previously believed, and checks are underway to see how far it has already spread. So South Africa was the first one to announce it to the world, but obviously it did not originate in that country. The Institute of Public Health and Environment reported the variant was recently identified in retests of samples that were taken back in November 19th and November 23rd. So, like I told you, the WHO has said it's early days yet. They have said that there is information of higher transmissibility, and they say most of the patients right now have mild disease. But it has also, the WHO has praised South Africa for its transparency and its willingness to not only share data, share information, but also share samples on this variant that is a high risk globally. So fundamentally, on one hand, also, while there's been a reluctance to share vaccines, the WHO has always said that naming a particular variant after a country, punishing a country for announcing a variant, will actually lead to a resistance or a reluctance to share this information with the world. Countries will be then, would be motivated to hide the information instead of announcing it, because they know, if they know that this is the reaction that the world will elicit. Much criticism has now come in from across the world in the manner, on the manner in which countries have behaved specifically towards Africa. Also, scientists now saying that travel bans are effectively ineffective. What we need to do instead is test, isolate the variant, and study it very quickly. It's a very interesting development on how the country, the world as a global population or a global community is dealing with this virus, and whether or not this will prompt the richer countries in the world to share their vaccines while they are in the process of giving booster shots and booster doses to their own population. That's the whole story on the Omicron virus, the variant that we have so far. We'll bring you more updates as and when we have them. Thank you for watching.